This video is sponsored by Connell Guides. To get your hands on the most intelligent study guides on the market for GCSE and A-level English literature, as well as GCSE and A-level history, visit connellguides.com and use code RS15 at checkout for 15% off your order.
So I've already made a video about how William Shakespeare presents romantic love in Romeo and Juliet. But what about familial love or platonic love? In other words, how does Shakespeare present family and relationships in his play Romeo and Juliet? Let's find out. How's it going, Revision Squad? It's me, Liam, aka Mr. Knight, aka DystopiaJunkie, and in this video we are going to think about how the theme of family and relationships is presented in Romeo and Juliet. To do that, we are going to consider the theme of family and relationships from multiple angles, looking at how the ties between blood relatives are presented in Shakespeare's play, how non-related characters become like family to each other, and how strong friendships manifest as well. That of course means that I will be discussing a bunch of quotations in this video, and I will even throw in some contextual details as well. Right at the end of the video, I will pose a big question for you to think about, which will hopefully help you to consolidate your understanding of this key theme. Hopefully everything I do here will help you out as you study or revise Shakespeare's play. If it does, please do let me know by giving this video a like, writing a comment on it, sharing it around with anyone else who might benefit from watching it, and of course, subscribing to my channel if you aren't already. It really does help me out massively. Alright, so with all of that out of the way, just what is meant by the theme of family and relationships? Over in my video about the theme of love in Romeo and Juliet, I covered how romantic love is depicted in Shakespeare's play. However, in that video I also said, so it turns out that love can be broken down into three elements: romantic love, familial love, and platonic love. This means that the theme is incredibly broad, which gives you a great opportunity to write a more unique response to a question that asks you to write about it. And so when we're talking about the theme of family and relationships, we're basically still talking about the theme of love, just not the romantic kind that dominates the play. In addition to this, the concept of family is wrapped up with all kinds of different cultural expectations in Shakespeare's play. And so if asked to write about the theme of family and relationships, you could consider how these expectations play out in Romeo and Juliet. Relationships is also a nice broad term, as it can cover strong positive relationships, strong negative relationships, the relationships between the old and the young, the relationships between the rich and the poor, and so on. Remember that one of the beautiful things about English literature as a subject is that it is so open to interpretation, and so as long as the things that you say are supported by textual evidence and aren't totally ridiculous, you can make this theme apply to the quotations you want it to apply to. Okay, so if that is what is meant by the theme of family and relationships, which quotations are relevant to it, and what might we say about them? So if we're going to think about how family is presented in Shakespeare's play, a good place to start would be in Act 1, Scene 2, in which Lord Capulet and Paris discuss Paris's desire to marry Juliet. When Paris states that he would like to marry Juliet, Lord Capulet says, "My child is yet a stranger in the world. She hath not seen the change of 14 years. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her ripe to be a bride." So with the theme of family and relationships in mind, we could say that these lines see Lord Capulet exert his power as Juliet's father to dictate her marital status. Lord Capulet's metaphorical use of the noun stranger sees him indirectly decline Paris's request, whereas the phrase 2 more summers, and the conjunction ere sees him tell Paris to wait until Juliet is a couple years older before taking her hand in marriage. As I discussed in my video about Juliet, the noun stranger might also imply that Juliet is naive or possesses little worldly knowledge, and so these lines could be interpreted as Lord Capulet trying to protect her and her innocence. Regardless, these lines see Lord Capulet behaving in a way that was typical of upper-class Elizabethan fathers. In this context, marriage was treated as if it was a business deal to be negotiated between a woman's father and her would-be husband, meaning that your family very much dictated who you would spend the rest of your life with. In a sense, you could argue that this presents family as quite controlling, even if this was fairly typical for Shakespeare's time. Next, let's have a look at how the theme of family and relationships is presented in the Capulet ball scene. Upon recognising Romeo's voice, Tybalt states, "This, by his voice, should be a Montague. Fetch me my rapier, boy." Thinking about our theme, I would say that this quotation emphasises the importance of family loyalty in Shakespeare's play. We know from earlier on in the play that Tybalt hates the Montagues, and we also know that Prince Aeschylus has expressly forbidden fights between the two families. That's what makes Tybalt's imperative, "Fetch me my rapier, boy," which he says to his manservant, interesting. By asking for his rapier, Tybalt is clearly itching for a fight, despite the fact that the prince has forbidden this, and despite also that the ball is supposed to be a jovial occasion. Subsequently, we could argue that Tybalt's family loyalty is so overpowering that it compels him to not only defy authority, but also to break social etiquette. Familial love seems to even have an impact on the most authoritative character in the play, Prince Aeschylus. After finding out that Mercutio, his relative, has been murdered, he states, "My blood for your rude brawls doth lie a-bleeding, but I'll amerce you with so strong a fine that you shall all repent the loss of mine." On one hand, these lines suggest that Prince Aeschylus has made Mercutio's death a personal matter, thus swaying the impartiality you might expect from an authority figure. This is seen in his use of pronouns, for my and mine make it clear that Prince Aeschylus is making Mercutio's death about himself. He feels personally affronted that a relative of his has been murdered. In this sense, his threat of punishing the Montagues and Capulets with a strong fine is more of a personal retaliation than it is an impartial judgment. However, what is this strong fine? We know from the rest of the play that Prince Aeschylus has previously threatened the Montagues and Capulets with death if they were caught brawling again, and yet the punishment he dishes out is Romeo's banishment. Arguably, being banished is much less severe than being executed, and so Prince's strong fine isn't actually as strong as he had previously threatened. This might suggest that Prince Aeschylus is so overcome with grief that has been caused by the loss of a family member, that he does not wish to inflict the same grief upon another family, or that he is so overcome with sadness, something which has been caused by his familial love for Mercutio, that he is unable to properly carry out his job. Ideas relating to the concept of family are also apparent in Act 3, Scene 5. Thinking that Juliet is sad because her cousin, Tybalt, has died, Lady Capulet vows, "I'll send one in Mantua, where that same banished runagate doth live, shall give him such an unaccustomed dram, that he shall soon keep Tybalt company." How do these lines relate to the theme of family and relationships? Well, I would argue that they suggest that familial love is associated with violence. This is because these lines see Lady Capulet plan on getting Romeo assassinated. She says she will send a message to someone in Mantua, with the noun one being a euphemistic way of referring to a murderer. She says that this person will give Romeo an unaccustomed dram or an unfamiliar drink, poison that will kill him. This impression is reinforced when she states that Romeo shall soon keep Tybalt company, for this means that Romeo will soon be dead, just like Tybalt is. The strong modal verb shall suggests that Lady Capulet is confident that this plan will go ahead just fine. In connecting grief and familial love with an act of murder, Shakespeare revisits another idea that dominates Romeo and Juliet, which is that love and violence are closely intertwined, bordering on inseparable. However, it is not just romantic love that is connected to violence, but the love that we might have for our family as well. Remaining in Act 3, Scene 5, we can look to Lord Capulet's reaction to Juliet's refusal to marry Paris if we want to think about how family is presented in Shakespeare's play. At one point, he says, "Hang thee, young baggage, disobedient wretch! I tell thee what, get thee to church on Thursday, or never after look me in the face." Here we can see that Lord Capulet is incandescent with rage. The first line here makes that evident. Hang thee more or less sees Lord Capulet tell his daughter to die. The noun baggage is a derogatory term, and wretch is an informal term for a despicable person. That this last term is modified by the adjective disobedient makes it clear why Lord Capulet is so angry. He is frustrated because Juliet has disobeyed him, thus defying the authority he has over her as her father and going against societal expectations. This impression is reinforced by the next two lines, in which Lord Capulet gives Juliet an ultimatum: "Get married on Thursday, or I will have nothing to do with you again." As much as Lord Capulet could be interpreted as being protective of Juliet at the beginning of the play, these lines present him as controlling, dictatorial, and harsh, and so family is presented in a negative light at this point in Shakespeare's play. Our final quotation that looks directly at blood relatives rather than people who adopt familial roles or other strong relationships comes right at the very end of Romeo and Juliet. After entering the Capulet tomb, Lord Montague states, "Alas, my liege, my wife is dead tonight. Grief of my son's exile have stopped her breath." Here we can see that familial love is capable of causing immense sadness, for the thought of Romeo being exiled has caused Lady Montague to die. Now, whether or not this is a literal or metaphorical death, Lady Montague may just be grieving so intensely that all of her joy and energy has died. It is interesting that it is news of Romeo's exile, and not his death, that has supposedly killed his mother. This suggests that she and Romeo were incredibly close, even though we do not see much of this during the play, and that she is completely devastated by the thought of being separated from her son. Now, this makes Romeo's earlier rejection or even betrayal of his family, as I allude to in my video about him, all the more tragic, because he offers to leave his family behind so he can be with Juliet, even though this clearly means breaking his mother's poor heart. Here, Shakespeare therefore shows us another negative aspect of familial love, for not only can it motivate people to commit great acts of violence, but it is capable of causing immense sadness, once again seeing the bard associate love with negative feelings. Let's move away from familial relationships and consider instead how other strong relationships are depicted in Romeo and Juliet. The first strong relationship I would like to consider is the one held between Romeo and Friar Lawrence. Using our knowledge of the play, we know that these two characters are quite close. Romeo relies on Friar Lawrence to help him out of his troubles, and the friar is more than happy to marry Romeo and Juliet, even if only to end the bitter feud that exists between their families. But which linguistic choices indicate that Romeo and Friar Lawrence have a close relationship? Well, let's have a look at Act 2, Scene 3, the first scene in which Friar Lawrence appears. Referring to Romeo, he says, "That's my good son," and "for doting, not for loving, pupil mine." In the first quotation, Friar Lawrence is clearly using the noun son in the religious sense, and so he is not literally saying that he is Romeo's father. However, this use of son, which you would commonly see a priest use to refer to a member of their congregation, for example, still implies a degree of familiarity and closeness. This is reinforced by the friar's use of the possessive pronoun my, which suggests that he feels particularly close to, fond of, or responsible for Romeo. Furthermore, in modifying son with the adjective good, the friar's fondness for Romeo is heightened even more. A similar effect is evident when Friar Lawrence calls Romeo pupil mine, for the possessive pronoun mine suggests that he feels responsible for Romeo's spiritual and moral education. It could be argued, therefore, that Friar Lawrence behaves as a father figure for Romeo, filling a role that Lord Montague seemingly does not fulfil in the play. But it is not just Friar Lawrence who acts parentally towards one of Romeo and Juliet's main characters. The nurse also acts as a mother figure to Juliet. As Juliet's former wet nurse, we know that the nurse breastfed Juliet as an infant and took care of her during her childhood, whereas she also starts to play as Juliet's closest ally and confidant. Now, there's plenty of quotations throughout the play that reveal just how close these two characters are, including the nurse showing familiarity with Juliet's exact date of birth, and how the nurse teases Juliet about Romeo on several occasions. But I want us to instead look at how the nurse speaks about Juliet to Romeo. When making sure that Romeo does indeed want to marry the young Capulet, the nurse says, "But first let me tell you, if you should lead her in a fool's paradise, as they say it were a very gross kind of behaviour, as they say, for the gentlewoman is young, and therefore, if you should deal double with her, truly it were an ill thing to be offered to any gentlewoman, and very weak dealing." Here we can see that the nurse is incredibly protective of Juliet. This is seen in how she warns Romeo that leading Juliet into a fool's paradise, basically a fancy way of saying if Romeo lies to her, would be a very gross kind of behaviour, a judgment that clearly demonstrates the nurse's disapproval of Romeo potentially misleading Juliet. This is likewise evident when she warns Romeo about dealing double with Juliet, another phrase that means lying. She not only calls lying an ill thing to be offered, making it clear that she strongly disapproves of the idea of someone misleading Juliet, but she also calls it very weak dealing, suggesting that she will think badly of Romeo as a result. Now, all of this generally presents the nurse as being very protective of Juliet, but when we consider the power imbalance held between Romeo and the nurse, Romeo is a male, the nurse is female, Romeo is wealthy and high status, the nurse is lower class and relatively poor, then the nurse's protection of Juliet is also incredibly brave and transgresses societal boundaries, and so she really must care about Juliet an awful lot. Another strong relationship found in Romeo and Juliet is the strong friendship held between Romeo and Mercutio. Mercutio teases and banters with Romeo throughout the play, indicating that their friendship is strong. But rather than looking at that, I want to look at "O calm, dishonourable, vile submission! Alistair Cato carries it away. Tybalt, you rat-catcher, will you walk?" Here, Mercutio challenges Tybalt to a fight after Romeo declines Tybalt's invitation for one. This sees Mercutio defend his friend's honour because declining a fight was considered unmasculine, which we see in the list of negative adjectives that Mercutio uses to describe Romeo's submission. Furthermore, given the patriarchal nature of society in Elizabethan England, male friendships were considered to be the ultimate relationship, ones that were free from familial or romantic pressures and were seen as being deeply loyal and intellectually intimate. This explains why Mercutio jumps to defend Romeo's honour. Indeed, by calling Tybalt a rat catcher, Mercutio looks to offend him and make him more keen to fight, which would therefore enable Mercutio to more successfully defend his friend. Now Mercutio makes his offer without thinking. He does not consider that Prince Aeschylus has forbidden fighting, nor that getting in a fight could see Mercutio hurt himself badly. To rush into a fight without thinking really does make it clear that, in the moment, defending Romeo and his honour is the most important thing to Mercutio, thus revealing just how strong their friendship is. However, strong friendships are not necessarily a completely positive thing. As he dies, Mercutio repeatedly exclaims, "A plague of both your houses!" Because Mercutio dies as he tries to defend Romeo's honour, Shakespeare suggests that loving too strongly, whether that's romantic or platonic, may lead to our downfall, and that living too passionately is illogical or reckless, which once again sees Shakespeare suggest that love brings with it sadness and tragedy. It seems that Mercutio is aware of this too, albeit a bit too late. In wishing a plague on both the Capulet and Montague households, Mercutio not only directs anger at the feud, because it is kind of what killed him after all, but at his close friend Romeo too, suggesting that he realises, in death, that their friendship was not worth dying for. Here, Shakespeare might be implying that as much as really strong relationships might make our lives worth living, they're actually not worth dying for. Okay, so that is my analysis of 10 quotations related to the theme of family and relationships complete. Don't close the video just yet though, as I've got a big question for you to think about. And that question is, aside from Romeo and Juliet's romantic relationship, what do you think is the most important relationship in the play, and why? Now feel free to do whatever you fancy of that question. You could use it to form the basis of a flashcard or mind map. You could use it to prompt debate between friends and classmates if you're working together. Or you could even use it to prompt a short evaluative paragraph. And you know where would be a great place to write that paragraph? That's right, the comments section. It always brightens my day to see the lovely ideas that you lot come up with. And if you are feeling brave enough to share your ideas with me, I will make sure to give it a reply and some quick feedback too, so why not give it a go? And with that question lingering in your mind, I guess it is time to wrap up this video. Genuinely, I really do hope that you have found this video to be helpful and that you feel a little bit more confident when it comes to studying and revising Shakespeare's play. Of course, if this video has helped you out, please do let me know by giving it a like, writing a comment on it to let me know, sharing it with anyone who might benefit from watching it, and subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Please do remember that, as always, I hope that you have an awesome rest of the day. If you are revising, please do take frequent short breaks, as a burned out student is not a happy or successful student, which is what I think you deserve to be. So in Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare suggests that family can be protective, but it can also be incredibly controlling. It can also inspire violence and cause sadness. Additionally, strong relationships, he suggests, can be incredibly loyal, which is great, but that this loyalty can cause recklessness and ultimately lead to our downfall.